Hello everyone, I'm Dr. John and welcome to Fundraising Bootcamp. We're going to get started in just a few minutes, so I need you to make yourselves comfortable and turn off programs that may reduce your internet bandwidth or distract you from full participation in the program. Also, if you're streaming movies or video games or your YouTube channel, then please shut these down, okay? This webinar is for owners of small to medium-sized businesses who are struggling to hypergrow their business and may not be able to access capital or know where to go to find capital that is suited for their business ideas. It is also ideal for those individuals who are working 9-to-5 jobs and are trapped on that hamster wheel that keeps moving even faster and faster, and you want to have a change of career, but you're not exactly sure what to do or how to do that, and particularly where you will find the funds to finance any activity that you might engage in. Now, here's one thing that's really important. I'm going to be covering a lot of valuable strategies and providing you a lot of information for which I could charge you a handsome consultation fee, but I won't. That's what I'm going to be covering for free on this webinar. And so I want you to make sure you take lots of notes. I'm going to hang around for half an hour right after the webinar, and I'm going to answer some questions. Please ensure that you see my screen and you can hear my voice. And if you can do so, please hit the number 7 in your chat box. Once again, the title of this webinar today is Fundraising Bootcamp, and I'm Dr. John Edwards. I'm the founder and managing partner of Piota, a business accelerator and a marketing company. I'm also the founder and managing partner of KGE Holdings, a diversified real estate development company. My decades of experience spans food and beverage manufacturing, Wall Street, and K-12 education. I worked with small businesses and major international brands, including Heineken, Pepsi, United States military contractors, New Jersey public schools, and other government entities. I am a trained chemist and an MBA, and I am a #1 best-selling author. We'll have an assistant monitoring your chat in the chat box. So throughout this webinar, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them using the question box on the right. Now, I can see a lot of you are from New Jersey, New York, California, Canada. I see the Philippines, India, and Jamaica. Wow, quite a global representation. My goal for you today is to provide you with valuable information about funding your startup business or your ongoing concern. At the end of this webinar, we will answer the questions of how do I identify and access varying sources of funding for my business, which may be at different stages of maturity. The strategies that you're going to discover are the exact same strategies that large businesses like Amazon or Google or Facebook have used to raise millions of dollars. When you truly understand these methods and funding strategies, it will completely change your life and improve the chances that you will build a business that is going to be very successful. We will continue to change people's lives by helping to educate them about how to start and finance their own businesses. My co-presenter is Lauren Cohen. Now, just to tell you a little bit about Lauren Cohen before she comes on to present to you. For over 20 years, Lauren and her teams at eCounsel Incorporated and Scale Up Enterprises have advised U.S. and international businesses providing concierge-level professional services in the areas critical to success, including financing, tax and legal compliance, insurance and licensing, and operational systems and security. Lauren is also an expert in business immigration law, boasting a stellar record helping foreign entrepreneurs realize the American dream. by obtaining EB-5, E2, L1, and other business visas, and starting a business in the United States or investing in an established corporation. In doing so, her clients have raised and invested millions of dollars in capital. Lauren's best-selling book, Finding Your Silver Lining in the Business Immigration Process, offers a wealth of information and tools for those seeking to access the U.S. markets through business immigration. In 2017, Lauren was recognized as a super lawyer by Attorney at Law magazine, and in 2018, she received the Leader in the Law award from the Florida Association of Women Lawyers. She was recently featured on the global TV series Unlocking Your Limitless Life. Here's the backdrop to today's webinar. I want to highlight some statistics about the survival rates for small businesses in the United States, and that will put this fundraising bootcamp in perspective for you. I need you to understand why the information you are about to receive is so important. So here we go. Let's talk about bankruptcies. As of June 2018, annual bankruptcy filings in the United States totals over 775,000. Let's talk about business failure rates. Of all small businesses that started in 2014, 56% made it to the 5th year. Of those that failed, 29% ran out of cash or runway. So viewers and listeners, let's rein in your fears now as we talk about sources of funding. Let's start off with Lauren. Lauren, here's my first question to you, and I'd like you to welcome you to this webinar. Here we go. Cash flow challenges and adverse liquidity risk can be frightening, stressful, and sometimes traumatic for entrepreneurs or founding investors, including real estate investors and their families. Lauren, what solutions might you offer to investors or business owners or entrepreneurs seeking to finance their business deals?
Sure. Thank you for the question, John. So there's really so many different available options, and it really depends on the business and how much money you're looking to raise and what you've done to get to that point. One of the most important elements of raising money is that you do need to have some type of corporate entity, a formal corporate legal entity in place. People are not, or lenders, no matter what type of lender, institutional or private, are not jumping to lend money to individuals these days because the risk is just too high. And also you're exposing yourself and your family if you don't set up a corporate entity to use as your vehicle to raise this money and build your business. So the first thing that we would do is figure out what type of corporate entity makes sense for you, whether it be a limited liability company or a C Corp or an S Corp, and all of the tax rules regarding these entities changed last year. And I am not a CPA and I do not profess to be a tax expert. So I recommend speaking to a really qualified, amazing CPA about that. But it's really important to understand that for the most part, even with an SBA loan, a Small Business Association loan, you need that structure in place. And then you need to build a business plan depending on the purpose of your business plan. For example, you're going to write a very different business plan to raise money from EB-5, which is our core competency. We've been writing business plans for EB-5s and all other types of business visas for very long time, over 10 years, but also the business plan that you're going to use to raise money in the institutional or private setting, like venture capital or angels. Those are going to be different business plans as well. So as I say, we've been writing business plans for a very long time, and you're going to have a lot of trouble raising money, especially institutional money, until and unless you have a business plan. And business plans designed by people like myself with that legal background and the business advisory and strategic experience is going to be a very unique combination that you're not going to find elsewhere. Don't go and use some software that you find online to build this out. It's just not going to work. So you really have to be very strategic in what you do. We have to figure out how much money you want to raise, the most likely places that you would go to raise that money. If you don't know about EB5, we can examine whether that's an opportunity, depending on your job creation within your proposed business. For example, if you're building a hotel or an assisted living facility or a multifamily mixed-use project, then that would be much more conducive to raising funds from foreign investors through the EB5 program, because there's a lot of job creation, both direct and indirect, than would setting up, let's say, a small internet business where it may that the tech is going to be the driver, not the jobs. So there's just so many variables to look at. And we have to really see, because I cover 7 risk areas, John. And one of the 7, the first one is funding and capitalization. And if you're underfunded or undercapitalized, you're not going to succeed. Your business will eventually fail unless you happen to come up with the new Google or the new Facebook or something. And that's possible, but you still need money these days. It takes money to make money, right?
That is correct. So, Lauren, do you want to tell us from where you stand as a lawyer and one particularly experienced in EB5? And we're going to talk a lot more about EB5 shortly. What are some of the funding options that you can make available to your clients from a legal perspective? You know, the right structures, the right places for incorporation. I understand some people might prefer to incorporate in Las Vegas or other states than their home states. Can you talk about what funding options you can make available to your clients and the structures?
Well, I don't want to mislead and say that I specifically make funding options available. I have colleagues and professionals that I work with within my vetted network that make funding options available. What I do is prep you so that you can pass the due diligence when it comes to those funding options, get you ready to go and speak to those funding potential investors or potential loan sources or potential institutional sources or SBA loans. And they're not even going to talk to you without having the proper structure and documentation in place. So that's where somebody like myself would come in to look and figure out what components are essential in order for you to be able to have that conversation. So I'm not sourcing the funding, but I am going to help you to be able to have the conversation with the angels, with the venture capital companies, with the potential investors, with the potential strategic partners and institutional lenders and private lenders and so on and so forth.
Very well. Now, Lauren, can you now tell us a little bit about EB5 and what kind of money we're talking about here? Most people are not familiar with the process for facilitating foreign investments. So from your legal podium, what kind of money are we talking about and what might that process look like?
EB5 is not for the faint of heart, let's just say. It's very complicated and it's very complex. Basically, the government is giving you the ability to raise money from foreign investors using various documents like a private placement memorandum and various solicitations. And there's 6 main components of any EB5 project, or at least any regional center EB5 project. Let's backtrack a second. There's 2 types of EB5 capital, 2 types of EB5 financing. One is direct investment and one is through a regional center. With a direct investment, John, let's say I want to set up a restaurant and raise money to build that restaurant, or I'm a foreign investor and I'm investing in setting up this restaurant and I'm going to hire the right number of employees, and that's a direct investment. I am investing in my business, I'm hiring the employees, they're W-2 employees, and I'm meeting the minimum requirements of 10 employees per investor. So if let's say it's $1 million investment, which right now is the threshold, unless you're investing in a targeted employment area, it becomes very confusing. And John, I think I mentioned to you, I have an amazing video that I'd love to share with your viewers. These amounts are, by the way, about to change November 21st. The minimum investment now in a targeted employment area is $500,000, and in a regular non-targeted employment area is $1 million. Those amounts are going to change November 21st to $900,000 as the minimum threshold in the targeted employment area. And it's going to make a huge difference. It's basically doubling minimum investment.
So now, let me interrupt you a little. $900,000 is a minimum investment. That's a significant amount of money. So let me ask you, Lauren, is there a limit to the number of foreign investors or EB5 investors that you can integrate in funding a project?
Well, no, not legally, but yes, practically, because the foreign investor wants to invest. Let's say that you're setting up, so I talked about a direct investment. The other one is a regional center. And in a regional center, it's a project that's approved and you invest passively into that project. And so for those, they're larger projects raising multiple millions of dollars. Now, there's legally not a specific number at this moment about the maximum amount of EB5 capital that can be in a project. But for the most part, the projects that I work with have about 20 to 35% EB5 capital out of the total capital stack. So the challenge is that even though legally you could go above that, unless your investors are willing to buy into that risk, you're going to have trouble raising the money, because why are they going to take the risk of the project not being built if they're dependent on all the other EB5 investors? Or the job creation numbers, like at a certain point when you're further down the road in terms of your investment number, like where you are in the queue, you may have you're going to have a lower likelihood of the jobs actually being created the lower you are on the totem pole. So it's very important to understand that there's a lot of variables that go into the equation. Even though legally you may not have a specific restriction, practically you do in terms of your ability to raise money and your success.
So Lauren, for startup entrepreneurs, how would you advise them to prepare to participate in these types of investments?
Well, I don't think startup entrepreneurs are going to be suitable for EB5 unless they are a foreign investor or they have a partner that is a foreign investor. So a startup entrepreneur, I have people come to me every day that are like, oh, I want to raise $1 million and I want to raise it from EB5. And unfortunately, that's just not the way that it works, because you're going to spend so much money to access that prospective investor that's going to be cost prohibitive. So it's very complex, and I'm trying to condense this very, very complex business model in a quick, summary, which is why I prepared this video. Now, again, this video talks about the direct investment and the regional center. And although the amounts are at the current amounts, the 500,000 and $1 million, even though those amounts are going to change, the other items are still relevant. So the video is still very useful and helpful and a great guide for people that are interested. But startup entrepreneurs, really, EB5 is not an option for them. Startup entrepreneurs need to look at more traditional financing, friends and family, angels, venture capital, traditional lenders, non-traditional lenders, institutional, SBA if you can qualify. So the better that your credit is, the more success that you're going to have in terms of getting an investor or raising money. Now, if you're in business for a bit of time and you're not drawing a salary, you're going to be challenged in terms of raising money as well, because they want to see that you're drawing a salary, not just that your credit is good. So there's just so many things to think about. And again, then it comes back to your business plan. How strong is your business plan, and how strong is your pro forma, and what are you planning to do with the money that you raise, and how is it going, you have to have a source of the funds and then your use of the funds. This is applicable in EB5 and non-EB5 deals. Where are you going to use those funds? Is it for operations? Is it for marketing? How much money do you need? And again, if you're, you don't want to ask for 100,000 if you specifically need 100,000. You want to look for more because you want to be as well funded and capitalized as possible. So, and then you have to build a brand. So that brand, there's as I say, there's 7 elements in my assessment process. Branding and marketing is one of the 7. Business planning, legal and compliance, funding and capitalization, insurance and licensing, systems operations and security, and financial and accounting, as well as certification and licensing. So you have to be very careful in terms of how you structure your business, depending on where you want to take it. Because ultimately, if your goal is to go public, you're not going to want to set up a limited liability company, because that's going to have restrictions in terms of where you can go, or an S corp. An S corp has a limited number of shareholders. And these days, everything, as I said, with the new tax code, is treated so differently anyway. It's very much a collaborative effort to figure out what is the best corporate entity for you, depending on your own tax situation and where you want to take the business, which is not a legal question, that's an accounting question. And one of the big challenges I think that lawyers and accountants have is that they're often not collectively working together, and they should, because we need to have the same common goal in mind. Otherwise, we're going to be guiding the entrepreneur. We're going to be guiding them in different directions depending on what they want to achieve with us. And sometimes accountants may not see the value of setting up a separate entity at the get-go, because from a tax perspective, it may not be useful, but from a legal perspective, setting up a corporate entity and separating yourself from that entity is super important because of liability. And so it has to, again, be back to that collaborative effort of working together for the common good of the client, and making sure that the client understands that. And that's part of why I have a network of professionals that I work with, to make sure that all of those matters are covered. It's not just, legal, because legal impacts financial, and financial impacts operations, impacts insurance, and what insurance do you need? So it's a multi-level and multifaceted consideration.
Right. And that's really a very important issue that you just raised. Can you talk a little bit more about the structure that might be more accommodating to certain types of investments, like EB5 or angel investors or venture capital investors? I know you cannot go into detail, but perhaps if you can just suggest to inexperienced investors and startup entrepreneurs, do they set up just one legal entity to take care of everything, or do they set up several legal entities to address varying tax structures for the same business or varying investment needs? Lauren, how do you work around the complication of the business environment?
Yeah, it's very hard for me to give a blanket answer to that, because each situation is so unique. It also depends for foreign investors. Foreign investors cannot be part of an S corp. So a lot of the EB5 projects are set up as limited liability companies, because they're able to bring in foreign investors as part of their ownership. But again, most EB5 projects are not necessarily looking to go public, but rather to raise funds and build and scale a business, such as a hotel or assisted living or restaurants. So there are so many variables, John, that go into the determination of what makes the most sense. If you're just setting up a small business, like let's say a coaching business or a speaking business or something along those lines, then probably setting up an LLC, a limited liability company in your home state is quite suitable, because you're not you're separating yourself from the entity. But again, you only have a certain level of protection. It's not 100%. Actually, nothing is 100%. Because they can always pierce the corporate veil. So I work closely with a company that does incorporations all over the country, and we together figure out what entity makes the most sense, depending on your state, depending on the laws, depending on your goals, and depending on your own personal situation. So I would hate to give advice over in terms of like a blanket recommendation that really wouldn't apply to 50% of your viewers. So what I recommend is to try to, speak with someone like myself. And I have multiple quizzes and an assessment tool that I think you've done, John, to figure out what makes the most sense for you, no matter what stage you are in your business. Because sometimes you may have set up an LLC and it's in one state, you move to another state, or you don't, but you may need to rethink that or reconsider based on your new plans or your new business model or your new business structure or something like that. So that's a possibility as well. So don't be married to something just because you spent the $170 to set up the corporate entity and you paid to have a registered agent, wherever that may be. Be married to doing it right. That's the important thing. And making sure that you have the right team in place. Because at the end of the day, don't try to play lawyer. Don't try to play accountant. Don't try to play financial advisor. Don't try to play cloud backup systems person. But try to stay in your lane. Those are my 4 favorite words, and figure out how to ensure that you have the best team working with and for you so that you can work on your business instead of working in your business every day.
And it certainly sounds, Lauren, as though one of the benefits of working with you is, as an attorney, is that you have many of these resources under one roof for direct access or articulation. Now, would we access your CPAs or accountants? When we come to you, can we expect that we're addressing our tax issues, corporate structures, strategy, how you access funding? Would you say that is correct?
So I want to be clear that it's not under one roof, but I do have very strong relationships with ambassadors in my network that have become ambassadors through going through a vetting process and working with me and my clients on an ongoing basis. If I don't have that professional in the particular area, then we vet them and go through that process with them to make sure that they fall within the scope of what we are trying to deliver, which is quality, ongoing, consistent service and work product, and collaborative, not competitive. And so yes, that's an important thing. But the other important thing, John, is to remember that, yes, I am a lawyer, but I'm not really functioning in my business as a lawyer. I'm functioning more as a trusted advisor and quarterback, just as I do in the EB5 world. So I'm going to manage all of the moving parts and make sure that everything is working collectively and collaboratively, just like I said, so that if X is supposed to do X by Y date, then it's done. And if not, then they answer to me, and so on and so forth. So there's accountability through the line so that the client at the end of the day has that trusted advisor who has their back and is working on their behalf to make sure that they don't have to worry about all of this stuff. Because all of this stuff can be very overwhelming, and it is not sexy and it is not fun, but that's why I'm here, to help you to overcome those things and handle them. That's what I've done in the EB5 space for so many years, and worked with project developers all over the country, and for that matter, the world, because there are US territories all over the world. The furthest one that I've worked with is the Marianas Islands, which is near Guam. It's a tiny little area, and they created an EB5 project. So you just never know where there's an opportunity to build and grow and scale something. New York City, there are businesses all over the place that are probably not properly structured, not properly insured, not properly covered financially. Maybe they haven't filed the right tax returns. They don't have the right backup systems. Let's figure that out so that when it comes time for you to scale, it's not just about numbers, but it's about infrastructure. Because at the end of the day, ultimately, we have to begin. My goal is to help business owners begin or create an end at a certain point. I say begin with the end in mind. And it's so true, because if you don't begin with the end in mind, we can't create a GPS for you because we don't know where you're going. So we help you to create that exit at the early stages. What is it that you want to achieve on your exit? How does that look? Who do you want to appeal to? And so on and so forth. So with all of these things in mind, it's very important to understand that there are an exit is super important from the beginning, not from the end. It's not like, oh, let me sell to the highest bidder. No, let's get you some structure and figure out how that looks and figure out what to do to make that happen.
I'm really happy that you clarify the fact that you work with not just Americans, but non-US investors. So your clients do not need to be American citizens only. Is that correct?
Well, I've been working with global clients for a lot of years. I am an immigration and corporate lawyer. So my clients literally come from all over the world, from Canada, from Israel, from Russia, from Brazil, from France, from the UK, from India, from China, from Vietnam, you name it, Argentina, Venezuela, Colombia. So yes.
And Lauren, there is a perception that only American citizens can participate actively in American businesses or own corporations. Can you clarify that?
No, that's not true. Foreign owners can definitely have business interests in the U.S. The difference is that they can't have a work visa unless they obtain, apply for and obtain a specific type of work visa. So they can't live and work in the U.S., but they can definitely have a business interest and ownership.
Thank you so much, Lauren. And we're getting close to the end now, but something you just talked about just now was very exciting. And you mentioned that when we're building a business, you need to create that business with the end in mind and with an exit strategy in mind. And so for many people who would just love to go downtown and incorporate their businesses at the lowest rate, can you talk about some of the risks that business owners may face when they do not look seriously at issues relating to risk mitigation?
Well, it's again, a lot of these things are very custom solutions, not just one size fits all. But basically, let's say that ultimately you want to build a business that you want to go public, or you want to bring in a significant investor, or you want to sell to a large company, or so on. So you may not want to set up a limited liability company, but people, that's the name, that's the buzz on the street. So a lot of people just do that because they think that's the way to go. If you want to have foreign investors, you are not going to set up an S corp, because an S corp cannot have foreign investors. So again, you have to think about the steps in the process. If you want to leave your business as a legacy to your family, how does that look? What's the best way? Maybe you need to own the business as a trust. I don't know. It really depends. So we have to look at all of the variables and figure out, not that your exit is going to be 100% set in stone, but ultimately, where do you want to take this business so that we can create the GPS to get you there the right way and as painlessly as possible with as few roadblocks and obstacles as we can.
Lauren, you just talked about the trust, and believe it or not, many Americans don't understand what it is, and there's a perception that it may be just for the very wealthy people. Is this something that business owners need to be educated about?
Yes, 100%. And I am not the one to educate. I am not a trust expert. Actually, I think that was my worst course in law school. But I do have a trust. And if you have children, it doesn't matter if you own anything, a house, any assets, a business, consider actually insurance policies, life insurance policies. I have amazing trust and estates attorneys that I work with. Consider speaking with one of them. You want to protect your assets, and you want to protect your children and your family and your home and so on, and your business as well. So it's all interrelated. When you are a business owner, there's no separation of church and state. And you need to separate that as much as possible, but at the same time also protect your family and yourself in the process. So it's, again, just think about these things. Consider speaking to professionals like myself that do understand the scope of things, or if we don't, we're able to say, hey, that's not my area. I stay in my lane. Let's bring this expert in to help you with that.
Lauren, it's been so great hearing you talk about so many issues relating to business financing. And I know so many of our viewers across the globe will find the information very useful, particularly those who are not in the United States. If there's one takeaway that you would share with our participants today in this funding bootcamp, what would that be? Everyone wants to raise money and accelerate their business growth. Everyone wants to have a business that is flourishing. So, what is that one takeaway that you would leave with us today on Funding Bootcamp? And again, everyone, this is Lauren Cohen, and she's leaving you with one takeaway on today's webinar. So please be reminded that her contact detail is at the bottom of this webinar or the website, and you can also contact her directly. Okay, Lauren, take it home.
The one thing that I'm going to leave you with is stay in your lane. There's no I in team, and do not try to do this yourself. Don't guess. Don't download documents on the internet. Don't file articles unless you know what you're doing. Speak to professionals. There's a reason that we are providing the service we're providing. We're trained and experienced, hopefully, most of us. So speak to us. I don't know of anybody that would not be available for a consult. It's well worth the investment in your business and yourself and your family to cover your assets properly from the get-go.
Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you, John. Pleasure.